All right, the Cuyahoga County Community Development Committee meeting is now called to order. Janine, would you please call the roll?
This is Ashley. I'll call the roll. I'm the clerk for this committee meeting for now. Calling the roll, Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Miller and Conwell are also in attendance.
Great. Ashley, has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we had Mr. Mark McDermott submit public comment via email, and I distributed that to the committee prior to the meeting.
All right. Are there any other public comments?
No, that was it, Mr. Chair.
All right. If not, can I have approval for the minutes from our March 2nd, 2020 meeting?
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second. By Simon.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Excellent. The minutes are approved. Well, we have one item on our agenda today regarding use of our care relief fund dollars. And Janine, would you please read that item into the record?
Resolution number 2020-0114, authorizing an award of $5 million of coronavirus relief fund funds and $1,800,000 of community development block grant funds to CHN Housing Partners to provide emergency rental assistance to income eligible tenants unable to pay their full monthly rent due to the economic impact from COVID-19.
All right. Is there someone to speak to this matter?
Yes. Good morning. Paul Herdig with the Department of Development. And please, because this is Zoom, if I'm too loud or too soft, someone give me feedback so I can adjust accordingly. I'd like to let the committee members know that I'm very pleased that with me today are my colleagues Sarah Parks Jackson, also from the Department of Development, and also the Director and Assistant Director of CHN Housing Partners, Kevin Novak and Kate Munter-Durbin. And after I've made my statement and entertain any questions, I will invite Kevin and or Kate to speak as well so they can give perspective on how they plan to administer these funds at CHN Housing Partners. By way of background, I'd like to say that one of the issues we've known was coming with the terrible COVID pandemic was the fact that as people lost income, as people were out of work, there were going to be consequences across the board in all phases of their life. We certainly have seen already the issues with school lunches where children, not receiving lunches at school. The issue of paying for housing costs is one that we've known was coming because as people have lost their income, many folks, especially in the lower income bands, simply don't have the kind of personal savings that would let them ride out several months of having no income. And we also have seen that attempts to help people with unemployment compensation, other types of relief, have not completely met the need. One of the major issues we face is that many of the lower income folks are in a situation where traditional unemployment doesn't work for them. They either haven't had the minimum earnings, they haven't had the number of weeks required, or the type of work they do hasn't been considered employment. It's been gig economy work or self-employment, such they really haven't been as protected as the white collar workers or the workers in the higher paid jobs have been. And so for this reason, the state of Ohio did recommend an eviction moratorium, which most of the municipal courts have observed, but that moratorium is starting to lift. We just read in the news, I believe on Friday, the Cleveland Municipal Court is going to start accepting evictions again, and some of our suburban municipal courts have never stopped. So there is a real issue with working folks who are now out of work facing the possibility of loss of their housing, really through no fault of their own, because the shutdown of the economy for several months has just totally disrupted their household budgets. We have a couple statistics that we do know, and these were mentioned in the preamble to the legislation. We know that the Census Bureau, the U.S. Census Bureau, did a survey of the state of Ohio, and they found that over 21% of people in the state of Ohio were housing insecure. And what that means is over 21% simply don't know how they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage. They don't have funds available. We also know that the last month when the unemployment rate was available for our county, for Cuyahoga, it was up at 23.5%. That's a huge rate. So we know that there's a great hardship out there. We have some limited data on rent collections, and I want to thank Sarah Parks Jackson for hooking me up with the national multifamily organizations that do this data collection. This covers all ranges of rental property, from the very highest, most upscale rental property down to the affordable rental property. And what the data tells us, in the higher income bands, people are still paying their rent at pretty close to the regular rate. But in the lower income bands, we're seeing a pretty serious fall off. So whereas the higher income, they're up around 90%, the lower income, you're down near 70%. So again, we see confirmation that our lower income residents are really being hit hard and having trouble meeting their rent obligations. Some of you may have seen a story in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago, which actually featured a resident of the city of Euclid who was in that situation. This person was working 2 jobs before COVID. She was working part-time in a school, and she was working part-time at a kiosk in a mall. Both of these were unfortunately had to be shut down. And so it's just an example of someone that had no income and really didn't know how they were going to pay their rent. So having kind of established that we believe there's a great need, I want to talk about the resources that have been made available. The CARES Act, the big federal legislation that was passed about a month ago now, maybe a little more, had several kinds of funding in it. One of them was some additional allocations of our HUD funding, Community Development Block Grant and Emergency Solutions Grant. And we're using some of that in the proposed legislation today. We're using about 1.2 million of the special HUD money, the Community Development Block Grant, and 600,000 of our regular HUD money, Community Development Block Grant. And that, by law, is for people in 51 suburbs. But we are working in collaboration with the other places where the HUD money comes. So again, I want to credit Sarah, who's done a great job of organizing a series of online meetings with our friends and colleagues at the city of Cleveland and in some of the other suburbs that also have block grant money. And we've been working closely with them to try to coordinate our work so that just as we are proposing legislation today to provide some money for rent relief, so the city of Cleveland has announced millions of dollars it will also make available to the same organization, to CHN Housing Partners. And some of the other suburbs, and I want to mention Euclid, Cleveland Heights, Lakewood in particular, have let us know they're going to be putting at least several $100,000 of the federal block grant money in for the same purpose. And so with the block grant alone, there will be a resource that's available almost countywide for the lower income tenants. But we're also proposing to put in $5 million of Cuyahoga County's coronavirus relief funds. And this is the $215 million pot that I know council has been getting briefed on a regular basis. So we believe that there's a couple of reasons why this is needed. One reason is that we think the extent of the need is so great that just the block grant money alone is probably not going to be sufficient to meet the need. The second reason is the block grant money comes with a pretty strict income limit. And this income limit is set by federal law, it can't be changed, and it's basically what's called 80% of area median income. It works out for a household of 4 to about $60,000 a year. And that's not just one person's job, that's all the income of the household, all sources combined. And what we've heard from many of our suburban mayors is that they believe there's people whose income's a little higher than that that are also impacted here, but not by any means rich, but working people with a little bit higher incomes. So we're recommending this $5 million of the coronavirus relief fund that could go up to 120% of median. That's about 1.5 times the block grant limit, and it will be available countywide. So before stopping for questions, I want to talk just for a moment about the plan that we put together. And as I say, we're collaborating with our colleagues at the city of Cleveland and the other suburbs to try to have this in one place. So our proposal is that one place will be CHN Housing Partners, and they are organized already to provide relief to lower income persons on a countywide basis. They've been doing this for many years with utility assistance and other kinds of assistance. So they have staff already trained, they have computer systems in place, they have management protocols in place to properly determine eligibility on a countywide basis. So once with council's approval, we'll negotiate a contract, and upon signing, CHN Housing Partners will be able to start qualifying people countywide for this assistance. The basic parameters are going to be, we're going to look at no more than 3 months of rent if that's needed. We are going to allow back rent to be considered. We're going to have this verified that their income is within a limit, verified that their income was cut by COVID, that they did experience a loss of income, and verified that rent is unpaid. And if they're eligible for payment, that payment will go straight to the landlord. It will not go through the tenant. So we're sure that the money will get where it's intended. The purpose of this, again, is to prevent evictions. It's to get people caught up so that as they go forward and hopefully return to their jobs, that they'll be able to go forward without being in eviction court, without losing their housing. There is a later on aspect to this that's beyond the resolution today, that's going to be done with another pot of federal money called Emergency Solutions Grant. So after the first 3-month period, after the catch-up, there is a plan in place that will carry people forward if they need that assistance on a longer-term basis. And I would also like to mention that the county's 211 number is active right now, so that as people who are aware of this are calling for assistance, they're able to get through to 211, and their names are being taken, basic information is being taken, so that right now they have a way to ask for help even before the CHN is able to get up in operation. I'd like to let the committee members know that our leadership, from our chief, Ted Carter, right up to the county executive, has been very engaged and active in moving this forward and making sure that this is given the launch it deserves, and we'll be monitoring very closely to make sure that we as staff hold our partners, CHN, accountable, make sure the money's properly spent and is used the way it was intended. I'm going to stop at this point to entertain any questions before turning to our colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Paul. One initial question. When this was set up, Paul, did CHN reach out to you, or did the administration reach out to Cleveland Housing Network?
Thank you. We actually issued a request for qualifications back on April 30th to a number of nonprofit organizations that we have worked with over the years doing housing counseling and other kinds of housing assistance programs. So CHN Housing Partners did respond to that RFQ. That was the way they told us that they were available and interested to administer this money if we needed them.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, could I piggyback on that?
Sure, go right ahead.
Good morning from the chair to Mr. Hurdig. Paul, how many nonprofits responded?
We had a total of 7 responses, of which 1 later told us they no longer wish to be considered. So there were 6. The major ones that we would have considered for this because of having their countywide reach were CHN Housing Partners, Eden Incorporated, and a group called Community Housing Solutions, which was formerly called Luther Inc. Housing.
Right.
As we went through the process of further exploring this countywide program, we learned that Eden Incorporated did not wish to be working directly on this. They're working in partnership with CHN Housing Partners.
Okay.
And we were also informed by Andy Nicoforis that Community Housing Solutions did not feel they had the capacity to work on a countywide basis for this program. The other 3 responses we received were from smaller housing counseling organizations. We are still considering working with any of these organizations in terms of outreach or other services to homeowners. But in terms of the rental assistance, we did narrow it down to CHN Housing Partners as the only organization really with the countywide capacity and scope to do this properly.
All right, thank you.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee?
Can I have some other questions?
You certainly can, Cheryl. Go right ahead.
Thank you. 120% of median per community, or 120% of Cuyahoga County's median income?
Thank you. That is on a countywide basis. They call it a statistical area, but it's the same number countywide. And so for a household of 4, that's going to work out to a total income of about $90,000. Again, that's not just a wage, that's every bit of income coming into that household.
So for a family with two parents working, their income can be as high as approximately $90,000.
Yes, for a household of 4, yes.
Okay. And then is there a fee for CHN's work in this area?
Yes, we do anticipate reimbursing actual documented delivery costs not to exceed 10%, but we actually expect the cost will be somewhat percentually lower because both the community development block grant funding, which CHN will receive from several sources, and the coronavirus relief funds will participate, so that we will be, as we always do with our federal funding, monitoring these operating costs to make sure that they're not duplicated or overpaid.
So how are the admin fees set up? Is it based on their hourly costs for the staff that they will have manning this, or is it based on a flat administrative fee on a monthly basis? How
Sure.
are they calculating that? I didn't see it in the legislation.
Sure. We're still in discussion, and actually because of the magnitude of this contract, we're actually discussing directly with HUD to make sure that the mechanism we work out has HUD's approval. But I will say there's not going to be a flat monthly fee. That is not an option. There's going to be an attempt to determine exactly what the costs are based on actual staff time, fringes, pension liabilities, and so forth, other direct operating costs. That may be reduced to an amount per case, but if it's an amount per case, that will be based on a calculation we can show to HUD of the amount of staff time going into the case.
So you may end up coming up with something equivalent to an indirect cost allocation plan?
That would only be if it was at the approved indirect cost rate, as with other HUD-funded activities.
Does CHN already have an indirect cost allocation plan, since they do work with so many municipalities?
With the chair's permission, I would like to defer that question to Kevin Novak, if I may.
Hey, Kevin. I can't hear you. Did somebody cut him off?
Doesn't seem like his mute button is on, but we can't hear Kevin.
Right.
Yeah.
Is Kate still around? Can she talk?
Yes, Kate, if you know.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
can.
Kate.
Okay. Well,
You shut your boss off?
I hope not. Good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to be here this morning on what can only be called a crisis coming to us amongst many families who need to maintain their housing. To answer your question, Councilwoman, CHN does not have an approved federal indirect rate.
That would make life simple. We already know what your rate was, and we know that would be the ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay. What kinds of element you're using? Staff costs, an overhead fee to try and, what are the elements that HUD's looking at so far?
Well, I would defer to Paul on the elements that HUD is looking at. I can tell you from our perspective, what we're looking at is what our actual costs would be to scale up to serve the people who need to be served through this resource. So I think what we've been talking to Paul and Sarah about, and I'll turn it over to you, Paul, is what is the most efficient way of doing that kind of costing? In other words, is there a way for us not to be lost in paperwork every day of the week in terms of the reimbursement? Is there a simpler way to do it?
So, thank you. And again, with the chair's permission, to try to answer council member's question directly, what we're indicating then is in the absence of an approved indirect rate, an overhead rate, we will be looking at what are called activity delivery costs, the actual costs, the staff time, and any other direct costs that are incurred. And again, we may be trying to reduce those to some kind of standardized per unit cost, but it'll be based on calculations of actual costs, which will be maintained for audit and can be shown to HUD or auditors or anyone else upon request.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome. Mr. Novak or Ms. Durbin or Paul, how was the $5 million arrived at?
I think that's probably for me. I want to, again, acknowledge the help of a number of people and, again, the leadership of the county executive in saying, Paul, I recognize this is a serious problem. We asked for advice from a number of sources. We asked for the folks at Enterprise Community Partners, Mark McDermott and the staff there, to actually do a national scan to see what their intelligence was telling them on the national lead. We asked some other advocates that we've known over the years for opinions they had. We asked our suburbs, and the basic answer we got back is it's difficult to know exactly the full extent of this need, but we think it's substantial. You know, if a number of suburbs had anecdotes to report of people in their community falling on this difficulty that was beyond what they'd ever heard before. There has been some national discussion of having an even greater need where, you know, there's legislation proposed, you know, multiple billions of dollars just for this purpose. I think one answer I would say is that as the calls come in, as people call 211, which they're doing now, as they begin to get qualified by CHN Housing Partners, we will see the extent of the need here. We will not be spending, you know, I guess it hopefully goes without saying, we won't be spending money that's not needed. So if we're fortunate, if it turns out the need is not as great as we had anticipated, that $5 million will be available for other uses. I personally don't think that's going to be the case. I think that what we're going to find is that the need will be even greater. But the system is set up so that the money will be used only if it's truly needed.
Okay, so it's I shouldn't take it that we know Cleveland Housing Network is the property manager and landlord of properties within their own purview. And let me first say this, or add to this, Ms. Durbin and Mr. Novak, just want to thank you for your constituent attention that you helped in my district. But knowing that you own certain properties, these monies aren't going simply to landlords and properties that you own. You're actually facilitating for the entire county. Is that fair to say? Or the city?
Oops.
Kate, go ahead.
Okay, yes, Councilman, that's absolutely accurate. That the vast preponderance of these funds will be spent on people who are not Cleveland CHN Housing Partners residents.
Okay. So the tenants, they actually access the benefit, or is it the landlord who will be reaching out, or both?
It could be, you know, we're anticipating it could be either way. But, you know, as Paul said earlier, the money will be directed and paid to the landlord. And in that way, we know for sure that we are creating the housing stability that we need to create.
Okay. Do you have any sense of how many residents will be served at this point? Maybe it's hard to know, but do you have any sense of what you expect to happen, or has it already started happening in terms of calls?
Well, let me first answer the capacity question. We did a rough estimate that perhaps 8,500 tenants could be assisted with the amount that's being made available from Cuyahoga County. To the question of the calls, I've not yet checked with 211 this morning since the county executive made an announcement on Friday of this recommended funding, but we will be monitoring the rate of calls coming into 211, and then we'll be turning that over. We expect, again, upon council's approval, we would expect this operation to start about July 1st. So as of July 1st, we'd be turning it over to CHN, but again, they'd be giving us real-time data on the volume of calls for help they're getting.
Okay. Let's just say we use this number that you've just given of 8,500. If all 8,500 needed assistance, how much of the $5 million would that consume?
Sure. Councilman, it would depend on the calculation of the need, because it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, looking at, the amount of funds each person needs to bring themselves current. We've done a rough calculation expecting that, with the county-wide median rent being about $790, that it would not exceed more than $800 per month at the very most on average. And that's kind of how we figured the 8,500 number. But again, we're going to have to see what the data shows when the applications start coming in.
Will you be making partial payments, or in a sense requiring the tenant to make, or if not requiring, assessing if the tenant is able to make any portion of the payment, if not the full payment?
Yes. Thank you, Councilman, for the question. We are, in fact, as we discuss the contract terms in detail with both CHN Housing Partners and our colleagues at the City of Cleveland, we want to make sure there's a uniform formula across the county so that residents of one city are not favored over residents of another. And as we're in these negotiations now, we are looking at a formula that takes into account the ability of the tenant to pay. So that, again, the intent is to only provide what's needed, not what the tenant themselves can afford to pay.
Okay. Did I read in the paperwork this is for a 3-month period?
Thank you, Councilman. The assistance is for no more than 3 months of rent. The contract term itself extends to the end of the year, although we anticipate that with the demand for assistance we're expecting to see, we'll actually be spending it out before then. But yes, it's limited to 3 months assistance per household.
Do you have any plans at the end of 3 months?
Councilman, there is a follow-up that's planned using a different funding source. This funding source is the Emergency Solutions Grant, which also comes from the Department of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And again, it comes in a collaboration between Cuyahoga County and the City of Cleveland. The same organizations that we're proposing to contract with, which is CHN Housing Partners, and they are working with Eden Incorporated. They will be administering the follow-on assistance after the 3rd month using the Emergency Solutions Grant.
Okay. You mentioned in your early presentation that there was a lift on the eviction moratorium. Can you tell us again, when did that happen, and do we know if it will stay lifted?
So, Councilman, I'm only relaying media information. My colleagues may have better information, but the Cleveland Municipal Court has indicated that it's now starting to accept eviction filings again on a limited basis. And we do have some suburban municipal courts, I believe Shaker is one, which actually never stopped accepting evictions.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Are there any other questions from the
Yes,
committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Hurdig, hi, Dan Brady. I'd like to have you work with our committee and trying to track this information as we go along, so that as the months go by, we have some sense of what's happening here and what the need may be. I'm wondering whether there will be need for longer than 3 months, and you've just spoken to that, but I'd like to keep our eye on that as well, because of the resources that we do have, and for the committee, and this was a proposal that was sent over to me to sign off on, and as with some of the other larger and more complicated and policy-oriented issues that were sent over, I have decided to send it to committee instead, so there could be, some discussion around it. I am very much for the legislation. I would appreciate it, and not to anybody in particular, but to share with my colleagues. It would be great if the executive would stop having press releases the Friday before this even gets to committee. I mean, if it could at least clear the council committee, perhaps, and then he could have a press release. But this business of constantly, these Friday press releases are not respectful to council. They're not respectful to our process, and it doesn't allow us to feel like we have the free reign to participate in these discussions as we should as a legislative body. We are not a rubber stamp. We are not to be. We are not there. There should not be public. There should not be press releases go out and put council in a corner. Now, this is one corner I don't mind being in, but this same situation has happened before, and it should not happen again. And I will tell this to the executive, but I want to say this in a public meeting, because if it's not said in a public meeting, then people don't know about it. Therefore, I'm for the legislation, and I appreciate your work, Mr. Hertig, and the work of Cleveland Housing Network, and very much in support of what we're trying to do here and what the executive is trying to do here.
Thank you, Council President. We will certainly commit to keeping the committee informed on a very regular basis with reports on the progress of this program.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. We appreciate those words. I think they should know, I think everyone should know, this council certainly is no rubber stamp. We don't have to do anything more than just look to the $30 million for the rehabbing of the county buildings to see that we will continue to do our due diligence around these dollars and all dollars.
Chairman Jones?
Go right ahead, Councilwoman.
Oh, thank you. No other committee members want to ask questions? I just wanted to make sure. So I have several. How do you plan on getting this information out to the residents, Mr. Paul?
Thank you, Councilwoman. There's many avenues we are taking and will take. And if I miss some, I'm going to ask my colleagues at CHN Housing Partners to make sure we don't leave any out. Again, we've been working in collaboration with the City of Cleveland's Department of Community Development and a number of other suburbs who, with our cooperation, we're going to have a single uniform countywide program. So each city will be doing its own outreach. In particular, though, I want to acknowledge the Cuyahoga County Mayors and Managers Association, and Michelle Pomerantz always does a great job of reminding us to make sure we provide all our information through that venue, as well as the First Suburbs Consortium, and this council itself making known to all interested parties this assistance is available. The county's communications office, using media releases and social media, driving folks to call 211, and then once the CHN number is announced, to that number. And in addition to that, a number of nonprofit organizations that we work with at the county level. Again, Sarah has been working very closely with a number of counseling organizations who will make this information known to their interested parties. And then in the city of Cleveland, particularly, but also in some suburbs, there are community development corporations which have a great connection to the community, all of which will be making it known to members of the community this assistance is available. And if there's channels we've neglected, we welcome the additional advice from others as to other ways we can make sure we reach every person in the county with this information.
Mr. Hertig.
And I will also mention workforce development, which has a channel to those who are afflicted by unemployment.
Can you send out the committee as well? That includes myself or probably all council, the list that you plan to cover today?
For the outreach? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, and my second question is, I represent primarily a good portion of City of Cleveland. If City of Cleveland is participating, will the county funds be used only for the remaining cities in Cuyahoga County? Because I know for block grant dollars it's done that. So if they have their own funding.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The coronavirus relief funds, the $5 million from the CARES Act, is available countywide. The block grant, as you've indicated, that's limited by law to certain geographies, but the City of Cleveland has announced they're making a substantial contribution of community development block grants themselves.
Okay, does it match ours?
Councilwoman, that's a difficult question. There's a formula set by federal law that's based on need that kind of determines how much each place has available. The city of Cleveland does have a great need, and it's making millions of dollars available for this purpose. So that certainly, I would say that their contribution is commensurate with the need.
Okay, thank you. When third question, when will the funding be ready for use?
So Councilwoman, we're discussing with CHN Housing Partners that, again, subject to the approval of this body, our intention to enter into a contract so that they can begin working directly with tenants as early as July 1st, and as soon as possible after that, actually making payments out to the landlords.
Okay. Next question. Have you contacted the landlords to see, maybe not just you, but knowing if anyone in the county administration have contacted the landlords to see if some of their tenants are in need? I would think that would be a streamlined way to try to assess some of the need out there.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I know that both myself and my colleague Sarah Parks Jackson have had conversations with specific people who represent, fairly large multifamily properties, and we have the Northeast Department Owners Association available as an additional outreach channel that reaches most of the larger property owners in the county.
Okay. And I apologize if you spoke to that earlier. My computer needed refresh, so I missed the tail end of your background. A couple of months of rental assistance might be needed. How will you address this $800 a month ceiling for each tenant? So I guess, well, I think you addressed that. So let's skip that. My last question would be, is there any discussion, or will this particular funding include homeowner mortgage assistance program?
Thank you, Councilwoman. It's a great question. The federal coronavirus relief funds, the CARES Act money from the 215, is not been made available for mortgage assistance. Now, I need to be careful about that. We were told specifically it can be used for eviction prevention. There are still analyses going on in a number of areas to determine exactly what the $250 million can be used for. It is possible that analysis may turn up an ability to use it to help people with their mortgages. We do know this is a need in the community. We support counseling for homeowners, have for quite some time with the community development block grant funds, and are working to assess what needs to be done for homeowners and to see what resources can be made available for them as well, because we're aware that there are numbers of folks in the lower income bands that are homeowners, not tenants, and they need help as well. So we're not ignoring those, but the resource we have in this resolution is limited to rental assistance.
Thank you. If you could, Mr. Hurdick, if you could keep me updated if you, once you find out any, because we know that there are homeowners that are going to need this assistance as well. If not, I mean, we've done a lot in this county, across this county, to get homes rebuilt and things of that nature. We'll just be back in, just going backwards. So if you could just let me know when that language comes out. And thank you for allowing me to understand that this is just for the tenants currently for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions for now.
Okay, Councilwoman. Are there any other questions from committee?
To the chair, with the permission of the chair, Chief Ted Carter is here as well and would like to make a few additional comments on the legislation.
Excellent. Let me ask you one additional question, Paul. Just clarity, and you may have touched on it and I didn't catch it, but because Cleveland is adding dollars as well, if, let's say, a nonprofit in Cleveland reaches out, who do they reach first? Is there a priority? Do they reach out to Cleveland, to Cleveland Housing Network, to us? Help me understand how they would actually work with Cleveland and our county dollars through CHN.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to, in a moment, defer over to Kevin or Kate, but I would indicate that from a county point of view, we would look for any landlord, including a nonprofit landlord, to both engage directly with CHN Housing Partners, as Kate said, and also encourage all their residents to be engaged. But I think, as Kate said, they would welcome any landlord reaching out to them directly, private or nonprofit, to make sure their tenants can be assisted. And I wonder, Kate, would you have any additional comment?
I think Kevin might be live. Kevin?
This thing on? All right, very good. Well, thank you, council members. Thank you for being patient with me as I, for the first time, embarrassingly, couldn't figure out my microphone and it be a public meeting. So that was great. To your question, Chairman, when we're looking at the allocation of the dollars, as you said, we will have an allocation of Cleveland CDBG, an allocation of Cuyahoga County CDBG, and then we'll have the CARES Act funds. And so the CARES Act funds have a broader income applicability than do the CDBG dollars. So we'll always be looking at trying to figure out what pool of dollars would be most effective. So the CARES Act dollars having that broader 81% to 120% area median income can serve a broader population in the city of Cleveland than the CDBG dollars can. So whenever anyone comes into our intake system, we'll be looking on a case-by-case basis in terms of the need of the individual as well as the other qualifying criteria.
Got you. So CHN is facilitating not only the dollars from the county, but you're facilitating the dollars from the city of Cleveland as well.
That is correct. And that's correct.
How much have they given you? What are the
Yep. So overall, there are $11.3 million from the city of Cleveland. Of those dollars, we would be doing the intake for all of them through a centralized intake system. And then of those dollars, they break down into 6.4 million of CDBG dollars that CHN will be administering and would be paying the rental assistance to the landlords. And then the remainder of those dollars are a combination of ESG and home dollars that our partners at Eden will be administering.
Mm-hmm. Do we have a sense of the size of the universe in the city of Cleveland when it comes to the low income band that's in danger here?
We do not have a specific number right at our fingertips, Councilman, but looking at CHN Housing Partners portfolio, what we've seen is an increasing need due to tenant non-payment throughout this crisis. So if you look at April through June non-payments, they've consistently increased, with our non-payments for our non-subsidized single-family homes being approximately 30% as of June 10th.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Again, are there any other questions from committee?
Council President, with our council chairman, with your permission, Chief Carter's here, would like to say a few things about the legislation.
Oh, yes. Ted, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to also let the record reflect that Councilwoman Brown is also in attendance.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just wanted to not take a lot of time, but just kind of reinforce how important this legislation is and acknowledge the great work that Mr. Hurdick and Sarah Parks Jackson have done in two areas. One, working with CHN to develop the program. And Council President, to one of your points, we have asked, and Mr. Novak and his team has really, they're data oriented, and so they have agreed to give us reports so we really understand the impact that this effort is having around evictions and housing stability, which is a key element of the housing plan, as you know. And then two, the work that Paul and Sarah have done aligning the policy with the city of Cleveland. So one of the great successes of this program is not only the money we're going to be able to provide residents, but also the alignment of policy and the way they've structured the execution of the program with the city of Cleveland and the four other entitlement communities. Lastly, CHN, having that entity executing the county's program as well as the city's program is really a significant win for us. I just wanted to know that I did note your comments, Council President, about the announcement pending council approval of this program. Sometimes timing doesn't always allow us the ability to perfectly sequence these, but we'll take that message back to the executive, but want you to know that we always have high regard and understand that this is not a rubber stamp body. We don't operate in that fashion, always working with your team and staff, provide great enhancements to the policy. So apologize for just that you feel that way, but that is not the intent of the executive, and we want to make sure we get the word out, and the mayor had made his announcement on Thursday. So it's important for the public to know that our program potentially was going to be coming in tandem with that. So with that, thank you for your consideration of this important initiative that really complements what we've done with the Small Business Stabilization Program.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
You're gonna ask for
Mr. President, I'd like to have my name added.
You're gonna ask for second.
Excellent. In fact,
Mr. President, I'll add my name. It's Simon.
I'd like to have mine added as well.
Is mine on there? Would you add it, please, Gene?
And last, Paul or Ted, if you know, how much with this $5 million, how much of the 215 million CARE dollars have been allocated to the Department of Development so far?
1 o'clock.
I'm sorry, repeat that, Council President. Someone was talking while you were.
Yes.
So you had a question about the CARES dollars. I heard that.
Right. I'll narrow it to your department as opposed to the dollars overall. How much of the $215 million has been earmarked through Department of Development so far?
2.4. No, it's 2.5 plus this. That's 7. Yeah, about we'll get you the exact number, but I think it's approximately $7 million between this initiative and then what we provided for the Small Business Stabilization grants.
Okay. All right.
But we'll make sure we get that to staff so you have that.
Excellent.
And excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Paul Herdig, apologize. I didn't include this in my earlier testimony. The department does request consideration of a passage upon second reading by council so that the contract can go into effect by July 1st.
All right, understood. Again, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll make a motion that we move this to the full council again under the requested second reading suspension. Is there a second?
Second by Simon.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. The item is moved to the full council.
Councilman,
Yes, I'm with you, Gene. Go right ahead.
this is actually Kate at CHN,
Okay.
and I just wanted to make a comment or two here.
Sure.
The first is to say how much we appreciate and how much it means to us that you have this kind of confidence in us to take on this really heavy lift is just no other way to put it. And, Kevin and I and our entire senior leadership team, when the crisis first began, knew immediately that the issue of housing stability and the ability of low-income people, in particular, low-income workers, were just going to be in trouble in terms of their ability to pay rent and in terms of their ability to remain stable in their homes. That is our mission at CHN, is housing stability. At the same time, this is enormous project. It will hopefully be short-term in nature, right? We all hope that. And that isn't necessarily a nonprofit's dream, right? To ramp up quickly for a short-term project. But given our capacity, and we are going to couple this with our utility assistance programs, where we're already serving 30 to 40,000 people a year, we figured that there was a fit here. And this notion of housing stability between utility assistance and rental assistance seemed like a really good fit. And then we also have deeper housing counseling for those households that need that. And then the back end partnership with Eden for those households that need longer term rental assistance. So the whole thing, I think, is well conceived. We will kill ourselves to do it well. But I want you guys all to know that, you know, it's not going to be perfect, and we're not going to be perfect on day one. And we haven't even started to hire the people we're going to need to help us get this done. So I guess I just want you all to understand how committed we are. In my 30-some years in community development and affordable housing, I think this is probably the most significant challenge we've ever seen in terms of the housing stability of people in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. So it means a lot to us, and our ability to perform well means a lot to us. And to the extent that there are frustrations or you're hearing things, and I think Councilman Purnell, you have seen that we're very committed to responding. We're not saying that there will never be a problem, but what we are saying is that we will respond well to problems that do arise, and kind of just an open invitation to any of you to contact me, to contact Kevin, to let us know if there are glitches or things in particular that constituents that you want us to know about.
Okay.
Council.
Kate, we thank you for that. We hear you, and it's well received. And what you're doing now is valuable work. It truly is. It reminds me, it's not identical, but there's some similarities between this and the foreclosure crisis of 2008. We know what happened when we bailed out the banks and all those mortgage companies, and they evicted so many residents after they had been bailed out. All the homes that were left vacant and vandalized, all of the downstream negative consequences of not helping individuals to remain in their homes through 2008. So you are doing the heavy lifting, and we do recognize that. And hopefully we've learned from history and are creating a situation now, not just in our county, but I like to hope across this country, that there's similar work going to make sure that we stay as stable as possible throughout this just difficult time of this pandemic. So again, we do recognize your hard work and appreciate it.
Mr. President, can I have a follow-up on Kate's
Sure.
statement?
Go right ahead.
Through the chair to Kate, how many do you think you will need to add? How many staff are you planning on adding? And what will be the administrative cost that is projected to be used for this?
I'm going to defer. I'll answer your staffing question. In terms of the administrative costs, I'll defer to Kevin. We think we're going to be hiring somewhere between 6 and 8 people who are largely going to be administrative in nature. The good news about this is we do already have a very significant intake platform that we currently use for HEAP and other kinds of utility assistance. So we're going to be able to rely on that capacity, but it's not going to be enough. And as you know, there'll be specific requirements that are needed for this program that aren't needed for our existing programs, like verifying with the landlords, doing all the extra income verifications that will be needed. Kevin, did you want to say anything else on that?
Sure. As we finalize program development and implementation, then we'll have the fullest understanding in terms of the administrative cost. I think as Mr. Hurtig had mentioned earlier, that there would be an administrative cost no higher than 10% of the contract amount. And we anticipate that it'll likely be lower than that because we'll be leveraging existing resources as well as able to partially leverage some of the work we're doing with the city of Cleveland.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment?
Yes, go right ahead.
Kate, really appreciate you making the statement you just made. And members of the committee, one thing that we learned from the Small Business Stabilization Fund is indeed, given the demand for these services and the complexity, there's always going to be glitches. So that's going to be inevitable. But one of the things that Paul, Sarah, and I have great confidence in CHN, and now on the phone with Kevin on Thursday, just stress testing his assumptions and his methodology, is that they have experience doing this, not at the same scale, obviously, because of the moment, but their ability to adapt and react and iteratively respond to issues that emerge, we think we have a high level of confidence, and that's going to be inevitable. So I think it's about the partnership and reacting and solving things quickly and transparently. So thank you, Kate, for proactively offering that and recognizing it, most importantly.
All right. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Let's see. We made the motion. We received a second. Did we? Did all council in favor say aye?
Yes.
You did. All right. So at this point, is there any miscellaneous business? No. If nothing else holds our attention, then this council meeting is committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.